Thank you for having me here today and letting me share our story of what we've been doing in South Bend. This is a recent photo I took, one that makes me so happy inside to see new housing in places that has not seen investment in a very long time. Places where people say the words bombed out and war zone and things like that, and to be able to see the turnaround is really, really just something that makes me happy. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about South Bend as a sort of a pretext to this, but I think you'll find a familiar context here. So this is South Bend. This is the St. Joe River. We are on the south bend of the St. Joe River. Very creative people in terms of how we name things. We have a great street and grid block, pre-autos, lots of great neighborhoods, lots of great walkable neighborhoods. Like Muncie, we had a lot of cutting edge companies. We were like the Silicon Prairie of the country at the time. Maybe the one familiar one, Studebaker. And our city grew. This is downtown in 1928. Population increased up until about 1962, when the sort of industrial decline really started to take effect in and around the Midwest. That population increase was kind of soaked up through buildings like this. These are great sort of missing middle housing types that started to naturally occur through neighborhoods, quadplexes, three flats, it's an eightplex in the middle, duplexes. But as I was saying, industrial decline, this is Studebaker closing. We have the rise of suburbia and sort of the disinvestment from these core neighborhoods out into the outskirts of cities, and it's an oversimplification, but our population starts to decline, and we lose approximately 30,000 people in South Bend. So this is a typical block pre-1960 that had 48 houses in 1972, and basically today has 17. I need to update that date. And so it makes me think about what I think of as sort of the challenge of our time, which is the healing of these neighborhoods. And healing is sort of the opposite of what happens when something is considered a war zone, right? Is that healing that takes place. My background, as Nate mentioned, I'm trained as an urban designer mostly. I designed neighborhoods, town centers, city extensions in Australia, based out of Sydney. So housing and neighborhoods were always something that I was very passionate about. But this was a place where pretty much you could build anything and it would sell in a second, and for huge profit margins. And they also have housing affordability problems, but it's because the median house price is over $1 million now in Sydney. So we all know about housing affordability. Our housing affordability challenge is kind of on the other side of that line whether it's labor costs due to not enough contractors and not enough people that have the skill sets to do this, shortage of materials and other things that are happening in the market right now. Another thing that I learned about that I had no clue what this was is the appraisal gap, which makes rebuilding in many of these neighborhoods very difficult. When the cost of construction is 2 to 3 times the value of what a house would sell for in that neighborhood, it becomes very difficult to get a mortgage, difficult or impossible, unless you want to put that gap between the cost of construction and that appraisal down in cash, which can be, in certain neighborhoods in South Bend, over $100,000 difference. And who's got $100,000 to put into a house in which, when you tried to go sell it, you could never sell it for the value of that cost of construction. We have changes in demographics across the country. One of the things that maybe surprises some people is in South Bend, our person per household is 2.4 people per household. The national average, I think, is 2.6. And so we have a lot of single-family houses that are too big for the general family structures or the way people live today. And it's not to say that we won't build larger single-family houses, but we have to think about a whole broader range of housing typologies as well. We can't just focus on one type of house type. We have to think about much broader and more diverse types of housing. There's aging in place. We have an aging population, and how do we address that? How do we have people who live in a neighborhood, who live in maybe a home that's no longer sort of size appropriate, and how can they stay in a neighborhood in a place that they know, love, and where their family and friends live? And I think one of the sort of hidden things that I think about a lot is a sort of inbuilt, ingrained suburban bias about the way we think about our communities. And this is both coded in our ordinances oftentimes, ordinances that were written maybe in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and today. You really have to think about how they are incentivizing or legalize places like this that are quite homogeneous in nature and oftentimes don't actually deliver a very high per acre tax value back to the city, and don't address a lot of those issues that I just touched on. So how do we look at our codes and the things that regulate how our city is built to allow for things that used to happen in South Bend and make sure that we can build back our city the way it was built initially? So one of the things that we did and in order to sort of lay the foundation for enabling change, some data collection, zoning updates, and neighborhood planning. One thing that I find interesting, this is some work that we had done by an organization called Urban 3. They are a consulting firm out of Asheville, North Carolina, that does a lot of research on assessed value, infrastructure costs for communities, and they can come into Muncie, Delaware County, and kind of analyze the place from a tax structure point of view, as well as understanding the cost of infrastructure and how these two things work together. This map right here, this is St. Joe County, and the colors on this map represent a range in value. Greens, the darker greens, are the lowest value assessed properties in St. Joe County, and the reds and purples are the highest assessed value properties in the county. Now, when I look at this map, I think it looks nice. It kind of is pretty, but I don't know what it says, right? It seems like there's no particular logic in it. And I know, because I live here, that the areas in the bottom part of this map is almost all farms. There are little towns in St. Joe County as well. And if not for maybe the grid of streets, you might not even kind of pick up where downtown South Bend is. But when you take your assessed value and you divide it by the acreage of the property, this map pops. This is the map that is generated. Now you can see where the high value areas in the county actually are. And one of the things that's kind of interesting is up in that corner, right up here, you see some reds and purples, and that red and purple disappears. That's a steel mill, all right? You would think that a steel mill would be one of your highest property tax generating uses in a county, but when you do it per acre, you find out that it's not as good as you thought it was, all right, when you're comparing apples to apples. And you can take this data and you can tilt it on its side and project the values up off the map, and you can start to see these purple spikes, and they're huge, right? And what are these purple spikes? Because every one of these little spikes is a building, is a parcel of land. And this is just zoomed into only South Bend. You can see downtown Eddy Street Commons is kind of it's a new development just south of the University of Notre Dame. It's similar in terms of use, like the Village's relationship between Ball State and the Village. And the tallest spike there is this building. It's an Embassy Suites hotel. So it clearly is outperforming in a major way a steel mill. So I think one of the things about this is that if you don't sort of look at your community using a lens like this, you might not fully appreciate where the value in your community truly is. And on top of that, you may not fully appreciate the types of buildings that are generating both value in terms of dollars, but also value in terms of creating urban, rich, walkable places as well. So the same company can do what's called a ROI model, return on investment, and this is where they look at the cost of the infrastructure and the cost to maintain infrastructure over time, and kind of compare it to the tax dollars generated by that property. And you can take what it pays versus what it costs, and you can start to come up with and putting against different building typologies. And what you start to find is your traditional single-family house typically will lose a community money every year in terms of the amount of taxes that they pay versus the amount of the cost of the infrastructure, the cost of just running the city, and it's not quite paying its fair share. And not only does it not pay its fair share, the more suburban it gets, the bigger that number becomes. But it doesn't take a lot more additional density in terms of townhouses, duplexes, and other things to start to get into the positives, right? And when you look at, even your Walmarts do make money, but it's not nearly what, or your big box retail type uses. They do make South Bend some money, but not anywhere near a small scale mixed use building downtown, and certainly not a larger office building. So one of the things that we started doing, so now we know this, right? Now we kind of have some math about what are the building typologies, what are the things that bring value to our community, what are the things that we have to do in terms of building back our tax base in a lot of these inner ring neighborhoods around downtown. This is an image that I like, although I've gained weight and lost some hair. That's me in the middle. We did a lot of design testing, all right? What we were doing here was looking at revamping our zoning code, all right? We wanted to revamp our zoning code so that we could make sure that the things that were, again, generating value that made these places great places to be, and I do want to make sure people understand, when I say value, it is both dollars and cents as well as the values of the community. There are two things that are both sort of equally true. To tune our zoning ordinance to make sure that we can do the things that made South Bend a great place in the past, and we believe will be able to heal many of the neighborhoods that have seen the damage that has been happening for the last 50, 60 years. We did a lot of research into looking at typical lot types, and then how, if you combine some of those together, you could start to get different building typologies. And we tested these things on a real part of a neighborhood. This neighborhood is a place where the city started acquiring vacant property in 2014. I started in 2016. And so we had all this land. Every one of those colored boxes there was a vacant city-owned parcel of land. You'll also see there's other vacant land. This neighborhood has a lot of vacant properties on it. So the point here is that we're really trying to understand what is like the DNA of South Bend, all right? And every community has its own sort of DNA, and we might have similar DNA in terms of like block widths and block depths or lot depths. But it's really important to understand what made Muncie, Muncie, or any town for that matter. And there'll be similarities, but there'll be differences as well. And so you want to make sure that you understand that when you're potentially updating your zoning code. This is a whole nother presentation here, but to give you a quick overview, we did a 2-year time frame in which we updated our zoning ordinance. We wrote it mostly in-house. We did a few major things here. The first is we created a new, what we called a missing middle zoning district. This allows for four units on one parcel of land. We permitted accessory dwelling units by right across the city in every zoning district and on any parcel in the city of South Bend. We reduced setbacks and minimum lot sizes. Your minimum lot width is now 15 feet in South Bend in our more urban zones. And we eliminated all off-street parking requirements within the city. So when that picture of all of us around that window, we were testing these ideas in which, how do we get new housing to happen in these neighborhoods, and what part of the zoning ordinance is either broken or doesn't quite work to allow us to do these things. So when I mean testing, I mean drawing. We're drawing those units on existing parcels to figure out how are we going to tune our zoning ordinance for the future of South Bend. And all of this, in a way, is about eliminating that suburban bias in the code. And another thing that I'd love to get into more or figure out more is I also really feel very strongly about that the redevelopment of a neighborhood is best done by the people who live in the neighborhood and the people who live in the community. And how do we democratize development in a way that allows for everybody in this room to participate in the redevelopment of their neighborhood or their community, and to do things, small things like just building an accessory dwelling unit in your backyard that might allow allow somebody for their parents to live there, or maybe kids, or rent it out temporarily as a way that they can monetize their own property as a way to help them pay for what we know is a very expensive mortgages these days, and help to address the affordability crisis as well. But how do we allow for people to fix and heal their own neighborhoods themselves? Because one of the things, and I think one of the big lessons that we learned over time, is that no one's going to fix your neighborhood for you, all right? No one's coming in to do anything, all right? These are neighborhoods that have completely broken housing markets, and no private development is going to come in to do this without an awful lot of city leadership and city participation and subsidies to go into that. So we won an award for our zoning ordinance, the Driehaus Award for Form-Based Codes. It's like, wow, that's amazing, right? And I'm thinking, yeah, like, so cool, but what does it mean? And it actually meant not a lot, all right? Because you can change your zoning ordinance and you can make it easier to develop. You can talk to as many people who will listen. We talk to the Realtors Association, the Home Builders Association, anybody who would listen. And they're kind of like nodding their head, and they're like it looks like deer in headlights to me sometimes. Like, I don't think you get that the world's changing around you, and we're telling you that you can do it in South Bend, and you can't do it anywhere else in St. Joe County in terms of the types of housing that I think we're going to need to develop over time. Small things started to happen a little bit. Some accessory dwelling units were starting to be built into new home projects, but mostly around the University of Notre Dame, where there's a lot of value there, people renting them out for short-term rentals and whatnot. So as part of that idea of sort of building up the capacity in our community for people to be able to build and heal their neighborhoods themselves, we're simultaneously running kind of a group of people where we're leading them through the sort of fundamentals of neighborhood development. There's an organization called Incremental Development Alliance and another organization called Neighborhood Evolution. These are two groups that will do, Incremental Development Alliance does a lot, will come into your community and sort of teach people how to become a developer, teach people what a pro forma is. They will potentially analyze your zoning code to tell you where things might work or might not work. And help you with the financing side of things in terms of how do you talk to a bank and how do you speak to lenders and all the things that it takes to build new in your community. We brought that group in, and a lot of people showed up. A lot of people are interested in this. Now, not everybody is able to maybe pull the trigger and do something on this sort of thing, but if you get just a few people out of that group who start to think differently and who have some means and are able to start, it has a bit of a flywheel effect that can really change a place. And so we have these gatherings, people come together, much like meetings like this, but we intentionally try to get bankers in the room, architects, designers, builders, people who live in the neighborhood. And these are all people who either have projects that they're thinking about or building. And so we really we're simultaneously trying to build this cohort of people that we know these are the people who are going to kind of get the job done in South Bend, right? We're also doing a lot of neighborhood planning. Everything we do is we do kind of neighborhood by neighborhood or sort of an incremental process of any of the changes that we made. We incrementally updated our zoning ordinance. We are incrementally doing neighborhood planning. And so while we're thinking about the zoning ordinance changes and the ideas that we have in mind, we are in the neighborhoods talking to people, and we're socializing some of these ideas about how different housing typologies, and could you see your neighborhood becoming more dense, showing the houses that I showed at the top of the slide deck. Those are all buildings that are in South Bend. So we always show people buildings that are in South Bend. You can go look at them, and you can see them, and you start to think, you know what, maybe that duplex that's a beautiful building. Like I could see that being in the neighborhood someplace. And so we did a lot of that work. So we took a zoning map that looked like this, where the beige area is basically only allows for a single family home. And through resident engagement, we're able to rezone the neighborhood about a third to maybe a half into this, what we call our urban neighborhood 2 zone, which allows for that lower end missing middle housing typologies. And we did this across multiple neighborhoods. To date, we've done 9 with 2 that are nearly finished. We also do large-scale concept planning as well. This is a farm, that's a county farm that's within the city limits of South Bend. So we're also looking at ways that the city can lead in the design, development, and the implementation of a place that can address a lot of the issues that we know we need to consider. Again, a lot of that was very helpful, and a lot of that started to, you started to see things, people coming to you, talking about ideas, wanting to, people who perhaps had some vacant land and were really starting to get serious about building in their neighborhood. But a lot of times this is what they had in mind. There's nothing wrong with this particular house, but it doesn't fit into the neighborhoods that have where all this damage has occurred. And this is part of that suburban bias idea. This was their idea of good, and our neighborhood could be so much better if all the houses were sort of like this. And so they say, Tim, I've got this 30-foot lot that I've got, but I'm going to need 2 more city parcels in order to make this house work. All right, like 30 feet is maybe the size of the double garage there, and you can't build on a 30-foot lot. Those are the sort of conversations. And I know there's an alley behind this property, but I don't want to use the alley. And I know the code says you have to use the alley if it's there, and all these other things. And so we're having these conversations back and forth. And so they come back, and they designed this, all right? And I was like, what the is this, all right? All right, and this was and so these are when you're having conversations, like everybody agrees, like, oh yeah, we're gonna build new houses. I want new houses, like, oh, this is gonna be great. But words do not communicate very effectively sort of the outcomes that are part of the process, right? This was, I remember the conversation very clearly because after they hung up, there might have been a string of expletives that went after that when I just said, well, why don't we just do it ourselves? At this point, I'm sick and tired of talking anymore. I'm just going to design their house for them. And then because this was a developer agreement in which the city was participating financially in this development to address that appraisal gap that we were talking about, and in this neighborhood, the appraisal gap was about $100,000. So the city was putting in $500,000 for 5 houses, all right? And we were not going to pay money for this little turret, all right? So, but this is how South Bend was built. Design matters, right? I mean, this is great. This is Muncie, too. There's a lot of houses like this, right? Muncie and South Bend aren't really that different when it comes to our neighborhoods. And so that idea of designing it ourselves is actually how the pre-approved house plans came into existence. This was an idea that has been out there for a very long time. There's famously the Sears catalog of homes that you could buy, and they would ship you all the materials and you'd build it yourself. It's not quite as detailed as that, but we went through a process of developing initially five pre-approved house types out of maybe 20 or 30 that we started just jotting down as a list of house types that we would like to see one day. But we very intentionally picked the 5 that are up on the screen right now. The one on the left is an accessory dwelling unit because we had just enabled accessory dwelling units across the city. So let's do one, and maybe if there's a free pre-approved plan that it might encourage somebody to build one of these things. The next one is called the narrow house. The narrow house can fit on a 30-foot wide lot. Oh, hey, you can build on a 30-foot wide lot, and this is what it looks like. We have a standard house, a stacked duplex that's starting to get into a little bit of that missing middle, the lower scale missing middle. And we thought we might do a 4-plex, but we have pro formas for all of these house types as well. And what we were finding was that the 4-plex, because of things like fire suppression and other building code related things, was making it a little bit too expensive. But if you ticked up to the 6-plex, then it started to make more financial sense. And so we thought maybe we'll do a 6-plex instead. Now, for anybody who knows about the zoning or the building code, you'll know that a 6-plex is in the International Building Code. And we can't fully pre-approve that because in Indiana, that has to go downstate to be stamped by the building department, and then also with the city county building department. But because it does require things like other stamps of approval for maybe HVAC and other things for that. So, but it is pre-approved from a zoning point of view. So that's kind of how we determined our first 5. And the catalog shows different facade styles. Each of these facades also is sort of a low, medium, and high cost in terms of some of them have extra details to them that might drive the cost up, but it adds that a little additional character to it. And every one of these drawings that you see here comes with full documentation behind it. Of how to build the house. So this is just the catalog. And if you say, hey, I do like the narrow house 2, which has the primary suite added on to the back. When you pull your permit, you get the house set plans for free. And these are, again, full construction drawings. They are typically better than what you would get from a builder if you went to a builder in your community and said, hey, can you build me a house like this? So this is the stacked duplex and the 6-plex. So another thing that we did, and this is kind of a learning experience for me. What you start to find is every time you do one of these things, you find another problem that you have to solve, right? One of the big problems in South Bend is we have infrastructure that's 100-something years old and 19 feet below ground. And when you want to put a new sewer lateral from a house to connect to that sewer line, a plumber just can't do that. You need like a whole excavation crew to come in, shore up the street. If it's a brick street, it's even more expensive to dig down that far in order just to connect back to the sewer line. Water lines are a little bit shallower usually, and so they're not quite as expensive. But what we were finding was that depending, and you can't tell this from the surface, you can drive up and down the street, but one side of the street might be extremely expensive to redevelop, and the other side of the street might be significantly cheaper, and it all depends on where the pipe is and how deep it is and what block you're on, all right? The neighborhood might look otherwise the same. So one of the things that developers hate is uncertainty and risk in that uncertainty. And so we created a lateral replacement program that will fund up to $20,000 of the cost to build those laterals back. We do have costs of, that we've seen the receipts that it would be even greater than that, $35,000 just to get a sewer lateral. And when you think about a house that we're building, which is maybe $220,000, $250,000 house, that's a lot. It's like a lot for that one thing, right? That you never see. It's not granite countertops, you know, it's a pipe, right? So it's important, that was important too. And this is one of the programs that has been successful, but there's still been some challenges in that, and we're looking at how we can revamp this, and maybe the city might start doing this ourselves for new development, again, from some capacity issues, as well as potentially skewing the market unintentionally through when folks know that there's grant money out there to get. So all of this to date has, these are not to date, but these are sort of recent. These are maybe in the last 2 years. These are things that are either are happening or are going to happen. These 9 projects, and they sum up to 223 new units in South Bend. They are either built, under construction, permitted. Approximately 110 of these units are pre-approved house plans. And just to be honest, like the city has put in over $11 million to help facilitate this. That equates to about $50,000 a unit. So by economies of scale, we've been able to address some of that appraisal gap, but and kind of do it in a more efficient way, I guess you'd say. A lot of this does include land, so I didn't include land costs, or there's some federal funds and tax abatements that have gone into this as well. But you know, this is kind of what it takes, right? So here's some results. These are the first 2 pre-approved house plans to be built in South Bend. The one on the right, the blue one, is the first. That is, and the one on the left has the primary suite on the back. These are market rate houses in terms of they sold them for as much as the market would bear, which in this case was about $175,000. One of the nice or odd, like good kind of good and bad, I don't know, the house on the right there, that white one, that was an existing house, and when they saw new construction, they thought, I got to fix my old junky house up. Now, it's not the best job, but they could have done better, but you should have seen it before, all right? So people, what you're starting to see is when there's progress in a neighborhood, people will start to fix things themselves, right? There is this sort of virtuous cycle that needs to happen because there's certainly that downward spiral that happened before that created the problem that we're trying to reverse. And that virtuous cycle is people thinking about, maybe I should fix my house and invest in it again. Maybe there is actually value here. Because a lot of times, why would you even get a home loan to put a new roof on or something like that when you'll never recover the value of that home loan back in, say, the sale of that property? These are being developed by South Bend Heritage. That's the side-by-side duplex. The red one is a stacked duplex. This is our award-winning stacked duplex. It won the Home Builders of, or the Home Builders Association of St. Joe County. We won Best Floor Plan, Best Curb Appeal, Best Kitchen for a city-designed, pre-approved house plan. I mean, I laugh about it. I put it up here because I want people to understand, like you could do great things, and you don't actually know sometimes how these things are going to turn out. We missed out on Best Bathroom, but we're gonna work on that for next year. This house has actually been built to near net zero building standards, so it also is extremely energy efficient. This is our standard house built, but other things, these aren't pre-approved, but these are houses that would not have been able to be built without a variance before, and now are able to be built by right. Side-by-side duplex, another side-by-side duplex, townhouses, more and more people are interested in townhouses. They are very competitive, especially against like condos, accessory dwelling units. People, I think this was a rehab of an existing garage, small cottages, modern duplexes. You know, we don't regulate style so much. These are 600 square foot, again, near net zero tiny homes. This is our first urban scaled fourplex that's been built in South Bend in probably, I don't know, 100 years. Our code also allows for things like cottage courts. If you don't know what these are, they're kind of like little neighborhoods within neighborhoods. It's a really cool building typology that allows for sort of small-scale community to happen within a neighborhood as well. I think this would be a really great idea for senior living as well. But in this case, the developer was or is a not-for-profit, and here are the first 2 of 7 of those of that cottage court. And these are actually duplexes. The upstairs is a 200 square or 250 square foot studio unit in which kids who have come through the foster care system live upstairs, and they pair them with adults who live downstairs in like an 800 square foot or something like that ground floor unit. And they're creating this intentional community on this block. And almost all the new construction that you've seen is almost in one block. And whoops. And these are the same houses that were in the title slide at the beginning of the slide deck. And yesterday, or a couple days ago, I was out there again, and all the siding is on, and I think some people are living in it. So these are Habitat houses that have just completed recently. And Habitat, great organization, one that had done a lot of work in South Bend, but not recently. But when they saw some of the things that were happening, you know, it's funny, they call me up, Tim, how do I get some lots to build houses in South Bend? So when you start to do things, I think what happens is the partnerships that you need to be able to, you know, again, rebuild and heal these neighborhoods, they start coming to you. You don't always know where these partnerships are coming from or who they are, who they'll be, but you know, new development, I think, sparks the imagination of people who realize that, hey, this neighborhood does have value, not just financial value, but it's a valuable place to live as well. It's close to downtown. There's a lot of great things about living here, and you can start to see the positive effects are happening, and I think there are a lot of people who want to be a part of that positivity. So you saw this in 2010. We were still on our way down, but the last census, we ticked up, you know. So the city of South Bend gained 3,000 people. We have 103,000 people now. We grew faster than St. Joe County. The sort of sprawling, premier subdivisions on the far northeast side of the county actually lost population for the first time. Not much, but when you develop a pure homogeneous single-family places, that is what is going to happen. Those neighborhoods will eventually start to decline from their peak when they are built. It takes a while to do, but that is what happened. And so it's really nice to see that this growth that was happening in South Bend happened across South Bend, not just in places like near the university, but some of the places that no one would have thought would have been places where people were moving into, rehabbing homes, and some of the poor areas became the places where the greatest level of population increase started to happen. And it was broad brush, which was great. So with that, I just want to say thank you and for having me here today. Happy to answer questions and talk to you a little bit about our experience. I'm sure there's no questions, so I can. All right. Okay.
Excellent job. Thank you very much. Very thorough. We have a lot of architecture students here and planning students, and we've been working in an area of historical significance in the urban core area here in Muncie, and are challenged by what we us as we move forward in developing this and really trying to put the data out there, which we've done. We've
Yeah.
done. 44.5% of the neighborhood and area wants 1 or 2 bedroom units, not these large-scale 3-bedroom, 2-bath houses that are in the neighborhood. So we've done the homework that shows the need, the desire, but we are at a point of challenge right now.
Yeah.
So, suggestions. You
That,
did it.
yeah, I think that the sort of, I don't know, maybe political climate in South Bend has been one in which we have seen so much disinvestment, right? Council members say, why can't you build houses in my neighborhood? Why can't these things happen, right? People want, new things to happen in their neighborhood or in the city. And we were getting to a point where, anything was better than nothing, right? And that's also a trap that you can fall into, right? And I think we got to a point, and this goes back almost 16 years now, before our current mayor, you may have heard Mayor Pete, Transport Secretary Pete Buttigieg, and I think that there was this time in which the mayor, the council was saying, we need to do something, right? We cannot wait, we cannot sit back. We understand at a high level the challenges that we're trying to address here. Like I said, when I started this job, I had no idea what some of these things are. I had no idea that it would be this difficult, right? So I think when we did our zoning code updates, it started in 2018 and adopted it January 1st, 2020, we did it in sort of small batches at first, starting with the things that people got variances for all the time, like 100% time, right? And so I was like, why would you is anybody here a builder or home builder or, or in that category? Why would we put somebody like that through the brain damage of getting a variance when you're just going to give it to them anyway? Why do I want to administer a code that's broken, right? It takes my time as much as, the other person's time. We have to go through this process only to do something that we all agree is fine. So we started with that, and we kind of called it cutting red tape. And everybody likes cutting red tape. And so we started this cycle of, we would go to council, we'd say, council, this is what we're thinking of doing, and don't need to vote, we're not voting on it tonight, but we just want to tell you that we're working on this to basically, cut red tape. And they're like, well, okay, all right. And then a couple weeks later, we come back to them with the code changes and what they are, what they will be, and why, and that sort of thing. In between time, there was one council member who was very concerned about zoning. She also, luckily for us in a way, didn't have a job, so we were able to meet with her a lot to get her comfortable with and understand why these were important. And this first round, they passed pretty easily. They were really no-brainer things anyway, so it was easy to pass. But we started this sort of ongoing 2-year conversation with this council, and we knew that we had to get it all done by election cycle before that started, because I did not want to waste my time starting over again and teaching people about the reasons why. So we went through 25 plan commission meetings, 25 council meetings over the course of these 2 years. And I think because of the process, but also because of the desire to see new things in South Bend and to see these places fixed, we never had a single vote go against us. It was unanimous every single time. In fact, I did invite the people who helped us put together the code and to come to the meeting, and they said this was the nicest, most friendly code adoption we've ever heard in our entire careers. And it was held up by the president of the council saying this is the best document and ordinance the city has ever put together. And I think that is a testament to not only the work we put into it, but the work we put into the socialization of the ideas, the work that we were doing with developers. We would always go out, and especially on things that we thought might be a little bit more contentious, we would purposefully get the people who are going to speak in favor of that, because those are the people that never show up to these meetings. It's always the people who think it's doom and gloom and it's going to be the end of my neighborhood if you put an accessory dwelling unit in. And so we made sure that there were always people, there were positive voices in the room. And so that is kind of how, in part how we were able to do that. I think they saw that we were working very hard to understand the communities, being out in the neighborhoods as well, and talking to a lot of people. And so, yeah, it went really smoothly. John?
So, one of the things that I think is we talked about a little bit outside of this conversation is that when you first arrived in Indiana, you were working for a combined county-city planning agency, and then early on, you were able to create a planning agency that's just for South Bend. And you kept talking about that suburban bias that was in South Bend's code. Do you think that having a plan director that just focused on the city helped you to get more specific about what South Bend needs in terms of development as opposed to what St. Joseph County needs?
Yeah, absolutely. I think what was happening is when I started, the Area Plan Commission would provide recommendations on variances and on rezonings. That those, the rezoning obviously goes to the Plan Commission, which is made up of, I can't remember how many people were on it, but a variety of people from around the county and the city. And then that recommendation goes to council. Well, often the council, the city council, got city priorities. And what started to happen as I began working there was the council would get super pissed off at the Plan Commission for making, in their mind, dumb recommendations to them because they weren't aligned philosophically any longer, all right? And this frustration, and then they would say, Tim, what's your recommendation? And I'd be like, oh, Jesus Christ, and get put on the spot. And I'll tell you what, it was uncomfortable for a while on these sorts of things. And what started to happen was the council just completely ignores the Plan Commission because they don't see it as having any value because it doesn't represent them. And it doesn't represent what needs to happen to rebuild the places in South Bend. People have different perspectives on where they live, and they have particular, whether it's a bias or just beliefs in how things should happen. And so when we were going through these code changes, and the Plan Commission was sort of informed that the city was going to start our own Plan Commission, at least it made the Plan Commission part really easy because then they just said, well, all right, whatever, this is what you want, approved. So the Plan Commission part was it turned out to be very like the easy part, but it was the council that was wanting to see change. Yeah, well, we developed them internally. I mean, we have a consultant architect that helps us. But what we were trying to do was one, make sure that we knew like the cost of construction, that pro forma side of things. These aren't high-end architecture, as you know. I mean, it's like one person says, it's just a dumb box, We wanted to make sure we regulated the things that we saw were important, the facades, the front, the corner facades. And those are the things that are actually the window size, the door locations, those types of things that really make the streetscape a nice place, and then the perception of the neighborhood changes in that way. but we don't care if you want to rearrange the rooms or make one room bigger or smaller. We think about, as we were doing our code rewrite, just like the way we're thinking about this, is what really matters? Like, what is the things that really matter to us about what we're trying to accomplish? And we don't regulate the way it's constructed. Some of them have been, as long as they meet the building code, they meet the building code. So again, if it can be approved, all right, then okay, then it's approvable, right? But one of those houses was built with post-frame construction, which is kind of interesting for a house. But that was that net zero house that I showed you. It's got a 10-inch wall thickness for all that insulation. Others are 2x6s and a standard sort of stick built. And we're working with a modular home company to develop maybe 2 types of houses that can be built using modular construction techniques. I think that one of the ideas that I have that I'd like to implement, I don't know if it'll happen someday, is that, if we're participating, like we're putting land into a deal or maybe cash into a deal to get some of these things done, is why not, if we're going to, we have a developer who's going to build 50 units, and because they're using all pre-approved house plans that have similar window specs for across all the house plans, there's maybe like 3 or 4 window types, all right? Those 3 or 4 windows will be the windows for 10 different housing units. The city could come in and buy the 500 windows or whatever it is in that thing, and we can buy the high-end windows, the high-end efficiency windows or something like that as a way to like start to fold in sustainability ideas into this as well. I think, part of this is about, like, again, just starting and seeing how it goes, getting things built, seeing, again, where the problems start to exist or where you want to try to get something that's a little bit better than what you did before. But it's helpful to get something started and then go from there. In the back? Nate?
Thinking about the land part of this equation, South Bend does not have a land bank. We're talking about the.
Not an official land bank, but we.
How have you guys dealt with getting property, offering that as an incentive to developers?
Yeah, initially, I think we were getting the vacant, these vacant lots in targeted areas because there were a couple CDCs that were doing some new construction, slowly, but they were doing things. And so we were purchasing through the tax sale. We would work with the county to pull, these targeted areas off the tax sale list, and they would transfer us the property, not exactly free, but pretty inexpensively. And so that's how we started. But it's not one in which every year we had to sort of justify why we wanted it. Some years they would give us the property. Some years they wouldn't give us the property. It was very inconsistent. This year, for instance, we did not get the properties that we asked for. I don't think it was because they thought that there was anything wrong, but I think the person who was doing it got sick and just forgot to tell the people to pull the properties, and now we got to wait again. But the good news is that from the city vacant property list, we are running out. We don't have enough now in terms of we're trying to get more in different neighborhoods so that we can work with others to do this. But it was a little L land bank. A little L, small L land bank, yeah.
I'm actually from Bremen, so I'm pretty familiar with South Bend, but also Elkhart, and I know there's a lot of land there too. And is there any interest or possibility of working with the Elkhart Planning Commission as like a conjoint effort to utilize some of the same resources that you developed for South Bend?
Well, we are looking to do like a multi-county land bank, for instance, and so there's been a grant to help get that off the ground. So we'll see how that works out. One of the things that I do think is important, if Elkhart wanted to do something like this, we'd be happy to help them out. But I also think that Elkhart's a different place, and they need to understand their place in and the types of housing that would be most appropriate for them. But happy to always share like how we got it done.
So I have kind of like a small question. So I don't know
how does it?
Right, so like what caused it to be decided? Like, was there like a larger firm paid for it? And
Yeah.
how is it going to be maintained as it changes through families and things like
Yeah.
that?
So the development is actually owned by a not-for-profit that is building them. They will continue to own the entire cottage court over time. So they're rental units. And these are kids who have come through the foster care system. They're 18, 19 years old, just starting out, and pairing them with people who can help them with, I don't know, their resume or their taxes, and the kids can mow the lawn and weed the garden type of thing. So the not-for-profit is the manager of the property, and they lease the property.
Back to the code and changing and stuff like that, was there anything other thing for sports or local dwellings and off-street parking that proved successful in changing?
Minimum lot sizes as well. There's a whole host of things that we did, but those are the big ones.
Those are the big priorities.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. You might find other like engineering things that get in the way, stormwater, potentially, other things like that. When you're doing a cottage court, you might freak out your engineering team a little bit about where the pipes go. So you have to like talk through those sorts of things, and the subdivision of land, and like, what's the address? And I'm like, come on, people, can't we figure out, yeah. So there are all sorts of issues like that too.
You had talked about walkable neighborhoods, so that implies there's a place to walk to.
Mhm.
So how did you work that into your plan so that there was, a park or a bodega or, something that made it really walkable neighborhood?
Yeah, a lot of these neighborhoods were already sort of walkable places. They had sometimes small businesses on the major streets or corridors through the neighborhood. This particular neighborhood has what was an old grocery store that's turned into like a community center that has a pay-it-forward coffee shop in it, a bookstore. There's another building, not too dissimilar to this in the sense of it's one story, but they're looking to add sort of office space and some retail space in it as well. So those things are happening too. And I think what you also find is that the more people, the more opportunities that businesses have. So I think you try to get the people first, and I think the businesses start to follow.
I think I saw down at the bottom of your listing of people that you worked with, property matters. Is that like?
That's a homegrown. This is a guy who was flipping houses, and he wanted to start building houses. And so he latched on to the pre-approved house plans pretty quickly. He's modified a couple to do a couple different things, and so yeah, he's been building some new stuff lately.
And I do have one more question about this ADU, because in my neighborhood, it's an old neighborhood. So the houses are probably, these houses might have been built 30s or 40s, and they do have those extra dwellings. And people are living, one is a rental, and then the other, a brother bought it, his brother is living in that. So back in that day, because this is not anything new then, because they did that back then, what were they called back then? Accessory dwellings?
I don't know.
But I mean, I love that.
Yeah.
because, I mean, and they actually still have room for some trees,
Yeah.
which I see you have trees, you have to cut all the trees down. I appreciate that. So,
Yeah, I don't know if they had a carriage house. Maybe it was another name.
these are small.
Yeah.
They're not big.
Yeah. So yeah, we used existing accessory dwelling units in South Bend as a way to show people that we already have these in South Bend. Is that one a problem? No. All right.
Good point. So we need to have that here.
I think what you need to have is all the options, right? And I think that's important because you just don't always know how these things are going to help change a place and help bring in investment or create the change that you're looking for. So I think that it was, if I look back I wouldn't have necessarily been able to predict what was going to happen. We didn't know when we did the pre-approved house plans that anybody was going to use them. But we thought, like, hey, this is a tool for people to use, and they're optional. You don't need to use them. And we found that people do want them. And what also happened was that some of these, a LIHTC project, low-income housing tax credit project, that was going to do a 50-unit scattered site project. When they approached us, we said, yeah, we'll support your project, but we want you to use pre-approved house plans. And they were more than happy to do it. And in fact, when they said, we want to do some townhouses, and here's some ideas that we have for townhouses. I said, I'll tell you what, you can do townhouses, but I'm going to design your townhouses for you. And they'll be pre-approved townhouses. And we worked with them to make sure that they met the QAP, which is the guiding document that they needed to address for the state tax credits. And they're gonna, now we will be having 2 new townhouse models in the catalog in the next couple months. And when they went to the neighborhood to say, hey, we're gonna build these houses on city property, the neighborhood embraced it because they knew that they've already seen some of the new houses, and they felt comfortable with an outside developer doing that in their neighborhood.
Were you able to navigate the appraisal gap, and if so, how?
Navigate? Yeah, I mean, you navigate it through money and subsidies. So, I mean, wherever you can get the subsidy is how you address that at least initially. I think what we're always trying to do is, how do you take a damaged property market, and the only way to bring that market back up to market rate, if you will, is to inject money into a place to address that appraisal gap. You can do it, there's a couple different ways. We do construction loan or construction subsidies. There's, what's it called, a forgivable second loan mortgage or something like that is another way to do it. Habitat for Humanity has their own sort of methodology for that as well. So there's a couple different ways to do it, but I think the goal is always to say, when we're working with these folks, is we need you to sell that house for as much as you can sell that house for. Now, we know it's far less than the cost of construction at the moment, but every time you do that, you're building back up you're closing that gap for the next house.
So were you able to use some grant money?
Yeah, we used a combination of general fund from the city, which is unrestricted in terms of, like if you're using federal funds, they have to go for affordable housing, and we do that. But we also wanted to make sure that we could just do market rate housing as well. And so we used a lot of general fund or some TIF funds. In one case, with a larger developer who I think is going to be working here too, called Intend Indiana. They're building 92 units, and we did a forgivable loan.
Tim,
Thanks.